In a bustling supermarket, a mother momentarily left her toddler in the shopping cart to grab a few items just an aisle away. During those fleeting moments, an elderly man approached the cart. With a gentle smile and a glance around, he handed the toddler a small, folded note before quietly walking away. Returning to her child, the mother was puzzled to see the piece of paper in his hands. Her curiosity turned to disbelief as she unfolded the note and read the message inside. Natalie couldn't believe her eyes, and she turned pale as she reread the note one more time. Was this some kind of sick joke? She looked around, trying to spot whoever had given Finn the note, but there was no one near them. Well, there was one other person, but it was a young woman, so it couldn't be her. She turned to Finn and asked him, "Honey, who has given you this note?" Pointing at the piece of paper in her hands, but Finn was too young to understand any of it. She felt tears welling up in her eyes as she looked at the note one more time. How could someone be so disrespectful? Especially after what happened last year. Finn didn't understand what was going on, of course, and he was his usual cheerful self. He just smiled at her and exclaimed, "Mommy! Mommy, kiss!" which immediately put a huge smile on Natalie's face. She gave him a kiss on the cheek and put the note in her bag, deciding that she would deal with this in her own way. The two of them continued their shopping, but Natalie kept an eye open for anyone who could have given that note to Finn. Judging by its content, it had to be a man. However, Natalie didn't see one single man in the supermarket anymore, except for one who worked there. She didn't believe that it was him. Then she had an idea, but she wasn't sure if it was going to work. As she pushed her cart to the checkout, she asked the cashier lady if she could speak to the manager. The cashier's eyes widened and she said, "Yes, of course. What is it about?" Natalie chuckled awkwardly and she said, "I cannot really explain. I'd just really like to see your manager, please." Smiling kindly at the cashier to let her know that she wasn't some kind of angry Karen. The girl behind the cash register smiled nervously, and she pressed a button before speaking into a little microphone, making an announcement. "Attention! Store manager to register 5, please. Store manager to register 5. Thank you." Natalie stepped away so that the next customer in line could pay for their groceries, and she waited for the manager to arrive. Minutes later, a serious-looking man walked up to register 5, and the cashier pointed to Natalie, after which he approached her with a formal smile. "Good day, miss. What can I do for you?" he asked politely, but Natalie felt the coldness in his voice. However, she put on her kindest smile because she really needed this man to help her out. "Good day, sir. I was wondering if I could have a look at your security camera footage," she said. The manager raised his eyebrows in surprise, and Natalie quickly continued, explaining that someone had given Finn the note, and she wanted to know who it was. She even took it out of her bag and showed it to the manager, but he didn't look impressed. "I'm sorry, miss, but I cannot let you do that," he said sternly. "But the note!" Natalie exclaimed, but he wouldn't let her finish. "I understand that it is a rather strange situation," he said, looking at the paper she was holding, "but I'm afraid I cannot help you. Good luck." And with that, he turned around and walked away, leaving Natalie with a helpless look on her face. Natalie sighed and pushed the cart to her car. After she had loaded the groceries into the trunk and put away the shopping cart, she sat behind the wheel and stared at that note. Tears welled up in her eyes and she crumpled it, feeling a million emotions at once. She just couldn't stop thinking about her father. Natalie put the note away, wiped her tears, and drove home. She would show the note to her husband, Mark, and together they would figure out what to do. She needed some time to let it all sink in anyway, so she turned on the radio and sang along to her favorite songs with Finn giggling in his seat. Sadly, it didn't distract her as much as she would have liked. Later that evening, Natalie showed the note to Mark. He raised an eyebrow as he read it and asked her, "What is this?" He was obviously just as confused by it. Natalie explained, "Someone gave this to Finn at the grocery store, but I didn't see who it was. It must be some kind of stupid prank, right?" Mark scratched his head as he thought about it for a while. He couldn't think of any reason why someone would do something like this either. "Have you shown this to your mom yet?" he finally asked, and Natalie shook her head in response. "No, not yet. I think it would upset her too much." You see, the note that Finn had been given said the following: "Hello, grandson. You've gotten so big. I hope your mom will let us meet soon." This didn't make any sense to Natalie because her father had passed away just before Finn was born. And Mark's father had already seen Finn countless times, so it couldn't be him either. The next morning, Natalie's resolve was like steel. She contacted both her and Mark's families, arranging a casual Sunday lunch. The note burned a hole in her bag, its mystery consuming her thoughts. She hoped someone might shed light on its origins, someone who knew more than they initially let on. Under the guise of a regular family get-together, Natalie and Mark laid out their plea. With the note passed around the table, they watched closely for any flicker of recognition or a hastily masked reaction. But all they met were furrowed brows and exchanged glances of confusion. The note was as much an enigma to their family as it was to them. The room buzzed with concern and intrigue. Conversations spun around potential explanations, each more far-fetched than the last. Yet, amidst the theorizing, not a single relative came forward with a plausible explanation, or claimed the handwriting as familiar. The note, it seemed, was an intruder of their peace, an unsolvable puzzle. Turning to her mother, Natalie sought a semblance of understanding, hoping for a connection to the past that she might have overlooked. Yet, the worry in her mother's eyes only mirrored her own. With a gentle shake of her head, she confirmed she had no idea where the note could have originated. It was a dead end. Despite their best efforts, the note remained a stubborn mystery, its sender cloaked in anonymity. Natalie's frustration mounted, but so did her determination. The note wasn't just a message. It was a challenge, a puzzle she was intent on solving. The question of its origin whispered to her in quiet moments, urging her to dig deeper, to look beyond the obvious. And she would. Natalie was far from giving up. Natalie, exhausted by the endless cycle of questions with no answers, decided it was time to put the note away. She slipped it into the back of her drawer, beneath layers of forgotten mementos and old birthday cards, hoping to bury its mystery. If she couldn't find answers, maybe it was best to try to forget it ever happened. In the weeks that followed, Natalie threw herself into her work and family with renewed vigor. Meetings, soccer games, and family dinners filled her days, leaving little room for the note and its haunting message. It became a shadow of the past, a forgotten whisper drowned out by the noise of everyday life. However, some things simply couldn't remain buried, regardless of how normal things would become again. Life found its rhythm again, with the days blending into a comforting routine. The note and its unsettling implications faded into the back of Natalie's mind, overshadowed by the laughter of family movie nights and weekend getaways. For a while, it seemed as though the mystery had never existed, giving Natalie a sense of peace she hadn't felt in months. But tranquility was short-lived. During a sunny afternoon at the park, as Finn giggled on the swings, Natalie found herself smiling genuinely for the first time in weeks. It was only when she went to fetch a snack from the stroller that she noticed it. A second note, its edges peeking out from beneath a blanket, waiting like a predator. Her heart sank as she unfolded the paper, her eyes scanning the handwritten words. "Let's meet soon, grandson." The world seemed to pause, the sounds of the park fading into a hushed silence. This new note, with its familiar handwriting and cryptic message, reignited the embers of Natalie's fears and curiosity. The sender was still out there, watching, waiting, and now, inviting. Rushing home, Natalie's hands trembled as she showed Mark the new note. The gravity of their situation was undeniable now. They weren't dealing with a simple case of mistaken identity or a forgotten acquaintance. Someone was deliberately reaching out, crossing boundaries that shouldn't be crossed. Mark's face hardened as he read, understanding that their family's safety was potentially at risk. The realization that they were under someone's watchful eye turned their concern into palpable fear. The idea of being observed, especially in such a personal family moment, sent shivers down Natalie's spine. They discussed increasing their home security and changing their routines. No longer could they afford the luxury of feeling safe in their own community. Their next step was a visit to the local police station, hoping for reassurance and action. But the officers' response was disheartening. Without direct threats or harm, their hands were tied by protocol. Frustrated and feeling more vulnerable than ever, Natalie and Mark decided to take matters into their own hands. They contacted a private investigator, recommended by a close friend, as their last hope. The private investigator, a retired police officer with a knack for uncovering hidden truths, began his work immediately. He started at the park, requesting security footage from the surrounding area and meticulously combing through it for any sign of the mysterious note giver. Natalie and Mark waited anxiously until there was finally a breakthrough. Days later, the investigator called them in for a meeting. With a grave expression, he presented his findings. The security footage revealed an elderly man who seemed out of place, his attention fixed on Natalie and Finn throughout their time at the park. His presence in the background of their seemingly ordinary day was chilling. The question now was, who was he? And what did he want with their family? Natalie's heart raced as she processed the investigator's latest update. The same elderly man had been captured on supermarket security cameras, covertly slipping the note into Finn's hands. This revelation pierced through her, turning her deep concern into outright fear. How could someone so deliberately target her child? The thought of Finn in danger was unbearable, pushing Natalie to the brink of despair. The investigators' work continued, piecing together the movements and actions of the mysterious man. But with each new piece of evidence, Natalie's anxiety only deepened. She couldn't fathom why this stranger would focus so intently on her family, especially her young son. The fear of the unknown, of potential threats lurking in the shadows, cast a shadow over her once peaceful life. Above all, Natalie prioritized Finn's safety, her maternal instincts in overdrive. She implemented new rules and routines to safeguard him, avoiding any possibility of crossing paths with the stranger. Each day was tinged with the fear of what if, but Natalie's determination to protect her son from unseen dangers never wavered. She would keep him safe at all cost. As the investigation hit a wall with no matches for the man in any database, Natalie felt a profound sense of helplessness. The tools and resources at their disposal seemed inadequate against the shadowy figure haunting their lives. Desperation crept in, enveloping her thoughts and actions. She was ready to do whatever it took to shield her family from this invisible threat. Then, one ordinary afternoon, as Natalie arrived home with Finn, she spotted him, the elderly man, waiting outside her house. A surge of protective fury overtook her. Without a moment's hesitation, she approached him, her voice a mix of anger and fear. "Why are you following us? What do you want from my son?" she demanded, ready to defend her family at any cost. The man's request for dialogue only fueled Natalie's anger. His calm demeanor in the face of her distress seemed bizarre, almost surreal. "Just leave us alone!" she shouted, her voice thick with emotion. His insistence on talking, on explaining, felt like an invasion, a violation of her family's safety and peace. In that moment, Natalie saw no human, no plea worth hearing, only a threat to her and her child. In a moment of raw defiance, Natalie lashed out, her fear manifesting as physical action like a threatened animal. With a swift motion, she hit his car, leaving a visible mark on its surface. It was a declaration, a line drawn in the sand. She wouldn't be intimidated, wouldn't cower. Her actions spoke of desperation, a mother's fierce need to protect her cub at all costs. As the car disappeared down the street, Natalie's heart continued to race. The safety of her home enveloped her, but it did little to quench the wildfire of her thoughts. Confusion, fear, and a lingering sense of unease gnawed at her. What would it take to feel safe again? The encounter had left a mark. Was she no longer to feel safe in her own home? Trembling, Natalie dialed Mark's number, her voice breaking as she recounted the confrontation. Each word relived the fear, the defiance, and the overwhelming need for answers. Mark's response was a mix of concern, anger, and a palpable desire to protect his family. They agreed. It was time to dig deeper, to confront this head-on. They needed answers, and they needed them now. Together, Natalie and Mark decided to involve their family once more. The mystery of the notes, the confrontation, it was all too much to bear alone. They hoped for insight, for some piece of information they might have missed, anything that could shed light on the stranger's motives. With the threat on their family, someone had to talk. The living room turned into ground zero as Natalie and Mark laid it all out. The creepy, stalking vibes of the old man and those weird notes that had been freaking them out. Everyone huddled around, throwing in their 2 cents, eyes wide and jaws dropped. It felt like one of those intense movie moments, except this drama was 100% real and happening to them. The family was shocked. As Natalie and Mark told them all that had happened over the past few weeks, you could see the wheels turning in everyone's heads. Seriously? That's crazy. And who does that? Were the kind of things bouncing around the room. It was a mix of disbelief and worry. Kind of like when you hear something so bizarre it just doesn't compute. But it was Natalie's mom who really took center stage, with a reaction that was almost too much. She suddenly got up, mumbled something about needing a minute, and bolted. It was like she couldn't handle it all. However, that only confused the rest of the people in the room. What was up with her? After what felt like ages, with no sign of her mom coming back, Natalie knew she had to check on her. It was one of those something's not right gut feelings. Knocking on the bathroom door, Natalie's voice was all gentle concern. "Mom, you okay in there?" It felt weirdly intense, standing outside, waiting for some sign that her mom was all right. The door cracked open just enough for Natalie to slip inside, and then click, it was locked again. The room felt very intense, her mom looking like she was on the verge of spilling some big secret. "Natalie, there's something you need to know," she started, her voice all shaky. Natalie's heart was racing. This was it, the moment that might explain all the crazy stuff going down. "I have to tell you something big," her mom finally let out, her eyes locking with Natalie's in a way that made her insides churn. The air in the bathroom felt thicker, charged with the weight of secrets about to be spilled. Natalie, with a heart pounding like a drum, braced herself. Whatever was coming, it was huge. They sat down on the cold bathroom floor, a weirdly intimate setting for what was about to unfold. Her mom took a deep breath and started sharing the details of a love story that sounded like it was straight out of a drama series. Natalie listened, wide-eyed, as her mom unfolded a narrative filled with passion, secrets, and heartache. It felt unreal, like listening to a stranger's story, yet deeply personal. The bomb dropped. Natalie's real dad wasn't the man she'd grown up calling dad. Her biological father was someone who had vanished into thin air before she was even born, a ghost from her mom's past. This revelation cracked Natalie's world wide open, revealing a layer of her life she never knew existed. It was like finding out she was part of a story where she didn't know all the characters. As her mom continued, the role of Natalie's stepdad came into the light. He was the superhero without a cape who stepped in, choosing to raise her as his own. This tangled web of family secrets and hidden identities made Natalie's head spin. The man she had always seen as her rock-solid protector had a story of silent sacrifice and unconditional love that she was just now beginning to understand. Learning the truth about her dad, her real dad, sent Natalie spiraling into a tornado of emotions. Betrayal, because secrets were kept. Confusion, because her life felt like a puzzle with missing pieces. Yet, curiosity crept in too. Who was this man? And why now? The roller coaster of feelings left her reeling, unsure of what to do next. But one thing was clear: nothing would ever be the same again. As the weight of her mom's revelations sank in, tears streaked down Natalie's face, a tangible sign of the turmoil inside. It was a lot to take in, feeling like the ground beneath her had shifted. Disbelief tangled with a sense of loss for what could have been. Yet, in the midst of it all, there was also a glimmer of relief, finally knowing the truth. Her mom's apology came through in waves of regret and love. "I'm so sorry, Natalie. I thought I was protecting you." Her words, filled with sorrow for the secret kept, were cushioned with reminders of her stepdad's love. That love, fierce and unwavering, brought a small comfort to Natalie's heart, a balm to the sting of hidden truths. Slowly, Natalie began to wrap her head around her mom's decision to keep this secret. She could see the fear of judgment, the protection instinct, all the reasons that once made sense. Understanding didn't erase the pain, but it started to bridge the gap between anger and acceptance. This knowledge of her real dad, Christopher, was a puzzle piece in her life she never knew was missing. Later, sitting down with Mark, Natalie unraveled the story, her voice a mix of wonder and worry. Mark listened, his support unwavering, his hand a steady presence on hers. Together, they decided it was time to seek out Christopher, to face him and ask the burning questions only he could answer. It was a step into the unknown, but they were stepping in it together. They reached out to their private investigator again, this time with a name and a mission: to find Christopher. With the added information, the investigator set to work, combing through databases and making calls. Natalie and Mark waited, their decision to confront this ghost from the past setting in motion a search that promised answers but also threatened to unearth more questions. Natalie and Mark planned the meetup with Christopher with a careful, almost surgical precision. Finn was with Natalie's mom, safe and oblivious to the storm of adult emotions swirling around him. This meeting wasn't just a casual catch-up. It was Natalie stepping into a boxing ring with her past, gloves on, heart pounding, ready to face whatever came out of Christopher's corner. Sitting across from Christopher, Natalie listened to a tale that felt like it should have come with its own dramatic soundtrack. He talked about his life, the reasons he dipped out, and the ache that filled him, pushing him to reach out now. His words were heavy with regret and apology, like he was trying to stitch up wounds with just his voice. Natalie found herself on an emotional roller coaster, strapped in tight, with no way off until the ride was through. Here was Christopher, a man who was a part of her, but also a complete stranger. Anger, curiosity, and a strange sense of connection tangled up inside her. It was a lot to sort through, like trying to find order in a tangled mess of yarn. After hearing him out, Natalie laid down her terms, clear and firm. If Christopher wanted any chance of being part of her life, there were going to be rules, boundaries that respected the family she had built and the wounds that were still healing. It was her way of taking control, of ensuring that if he stepped into their lives, it wouldn't just be on his terms. The next step was a meeting that felt like something out of a peace treaty negotiation. Natalie's biological and adoptive parents coming face to face, not to reopen old battles, but to find a way to coexist, for her sake. It was about addressing the hurt, the gaps, and the silences, hoping to weave together a narrative that included all of them, scars and all. When Natalie's mom and Christopher finally sat down together, the air was thick with decades of what-ifs and if-onlys. It was awkward at first, like starting a car that's been left in the garage for too long. But then, the conversation started to flow, and with it came the release of so many pent-up emotions. It wasn't easy, but it was a start, a step towards mending fences and healing old wounds. As time passed, Natalie and her family began to find a rhythm with Christopher in their lives. It was like learning a new dance, one where everyone's still a bit unsure of the steps, but willing to give it a shot. There was a lot of tiptoeing around, testing waters, but beneath it all, there was this undercurrent of hope. Maybe, just maybe, they could make this work. Natalie couldn't quite see Christopher as her dad, and honestly, she wasn't sure she wanted to. Instead, she found this sweet spot where he was more like an uncle. It was a title that fit the shape of their relationship. A little distant, a bit awkward, but still family. This setup felt right to her, a way to keep him close without unsettling the balance of the family she knew. For Christopher, just being allowed into Natalie and Finn's world was a gift. He knew the boundaries and respected them, grateful for whatever role he was allowed to play in their lives. There was no pushing for more, no overstepping. His contentment in this arrangement was clear. It was about them, their needs, and their comfort, not his own desires. The story of Natalie's family, with all its twists and turns, found a sort of resting place. It wasn't the kind of neat, tidy ending you see in movies, but it was real and honest. They were a family redefined, embracing both the scars and the newfound connections that had shaped them. And as they moved forward, it was with an understanding that while the past may shape us, it's the present we have a say in.